Carl, you've mentioned that the French government has decided to put your name on the list of sanctions, and they have presented your name to the foreign, commission of the European Union. What is that? Is who's deciding about it? Who's behind this list? Is that Kaya Kallas and the people below her? What is who's responsible for that? And who's implementing that? Is the foreign, I don't know, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the European Union?
No, it's the it's the European Council. It's the European Council, meaning that this decision is proposed, and it was, as far as I know, it was the list was submitted to the European Council on the 27th of November. It was decided, I think, again, I may be wrong, but I'm not sure exactly, but it was accepted or validated, I could say, on the 10th of December by the Council of Foreign Ministers of the EU. Uh, the thing is that the problem is not so much who put my name on the list, although this could be a valid question because I'm very strange to have a French government deciding to put a Swiss citizen on
Yeah,
a sanction
exactly.
list.
That's why I'm asking this. Yeah.
This is no, but that's very strange. But I'm not nothing surprised me anymore. The problem is that if you have such when you are put on such a list, obviously there should be consultation with the corresponding governments, and the question that should be asked is because my government, the Swiss government, is obliged by law to take the protection of its own citizens. You see, so they
Where
do
are they?
that.
Yeah.
Well, asking the question is answering the question. So we have here a first point, but again, the problem here is also the process, because even if in the French, I mean, I don't know where ultimately the decision come from. It might be some obscure people in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs who decided that Baud is probably a propagandist. You know, I don't know exactly what is the rationale behind this. Um, and that's the whole thing, when you make something wrong, um, you can be, I mean, if you have a speed ticket on the road or things like that, you know that you drove too fast or things like that. If you make a theft or things like that, you know that you have made something wrong. Um, in my case, I didn't breach any law. So, what is the criteria to decide that someone is propagandist? What is propaganda? That could be the first question, in fact, because this is not defined whatsoever. Nobody knows what it is. So you're accused of something that nobody knows exactly what it is. And even if it were propaganda, let's say, people don't even know to whom is benefiting from that. Because if you read the text of the sanction, this is attributable to Russia. So they didn't even know who is the beneficiary of this propaganda, disinformation, or whatever. So you see, you're accused of theft, but nobody has been stolen. I mean, stolen. I mean, got to. So who who did you stole from? Nobody knows that. You're accused nevertheless. It's supposed to be someone, but you don't really know who. So uh, it's exactly the problem in which we are, and that shows, in fact, that we are in a situation as we had in the late 17th century or so, where the king could decide, well, you are guilty, period. He doesn't have to justify things. You don't have any mean to counter that because that's the king. He decides that you are guilty of something. He doesn't even have to demonstrate that. It's a simple accusation. And he applies a sanction even before you can defend yourself. We are back to the 17th century, and that's where you had people like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, Descartes, all these. I don't know how it is in English, but in French it's le siècle des Lumières. I think it's the Enlightenment or something like that in English. But that's the century in which people started to think about what is democracy, how how is or should the state be governed. The rule of law started at this point of time where people started to elaborate the structures of the modern state with the separation of powers that I mentioned before, where we have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary branch, and all those three branches working together, but controlling each other at the same time, monitoring each other at the same time, in order to ensure that political decisions might be just in favor of the people and not just the result of the bad mood of someone somewhere in an obscure office.
Carl, we really are, we're sorry about what's going on with you in Europe. And I look at Europe today. I had the opportunity to be in Europe and live in Europe. I'm happy that I'm not living there. And because this is pure dictatorship, I don't know what else can we put on it unless a dictatorship. When you don't let your people, your citizens who are against war, everything. I was talking, we've done many sessions here on this podcast, and every time you were talking about, how to avoid war, how to put an end to the war, how to bring peace to Europe, how to have a prosperous Europe, a powerful Europe. But out of all those discussions, hours and hours, they're getting you, as a Russian propagandist. It's beyond any sort of understanding. I don't know how to translate that, how to interpret that.
Well, your question is very good that you bring peace into the debate because if the French government advocates to continue the war and accuses me of making propaganda that is contrary to what they want to do. But France, as other countries in Europe, in fact, have signed the Pact on the Freedom of Opinion, which in Article, it's a pact that was signed in 1966, if I'm not wrong. And in Article 20 of this pact, it said that propaganda in favor of war is illegal, meaning that I'm exactly the opposite of what the government is making in France. I'm condemned. I'm condemned for doing something that is not illegal, while the French government is doing something illegal. As you said, the whole purpose of all that, and it is in all my books, and as you said, in many shows, I'm an advocate of intelligence. Sorry, of a kind of a intelligent solution to the problem, meaning that when you want to address a problem, you need to understand both parties. I mean, at the end of the day, this is something extremely simple. You do that even at personal level if you want to mediate or solve a problem between your two kids, you have to understand what one says or what one and what the other wants or the other one wants, and you try to find a solution that satisfies the two. You can punish the two, but you can, if you want to have a peaceful solution, you try to accommodate the perception of both, meaning that you need to understand both, and that applies exactly the same uh, for countries. I mean, I have done exactly that in arbitration or things like that, mediation for in tribal conflicts, for instance, or interfactional conflicts in Africa or things like that. You don't take a party. You don't say, well, you're right and you're wrong. No, you go to both. And because, as I said, everybody in a conflict has the feeling he's right. Otherwise, he wouldn't really fight if you were convinced he was wrong. Meaning that for good or bad reason, both parties think they're on the right side, meaning that you need to understand the two parties. That's why having a so-called peace negotiation by addressing only one party is is a planned failure, because obviously if you have a peace agreement or whatever, you need to have both parties have to understand each other, have to agree to a common position, and therefore there is no way around. If you want to have peace, even if you hate Putin or whoever, or Zelensky or whoever, you need to understand their position, and you have to integrate their position into the final settlement, regardless of what you think about them, because this is the only way to have peace. I explained many times, a negotiation is basically that you have party A with this position and party B with his position. And of course, at the beginning, they're very different. And the whole purpose of a negotiation is to bring those positions closer and closer to each other. And that may take years, that may take months or weeks or whatever. It cannot be imposed from the outside. It has to be it has to be accepted, internalized by both parties. But therefore, if you want to do that, you have to understand that both parties may have different views, and you have to understand that they have different views, and you have to accept that they have different views. You can help them to bring their views closer to the other one, but at the end of the day, this is the whole thing. You need to have um, to accept the very idea of both parties have a distinct position, and that this position uh, is in fact valid. We cannot, as a Swiss or European Union or whatever, I cannot impose peace in Ukraine. At the end of the day, peace will be done regardless of who you like or who you dislike. The peace will be done between the two warring parties. There is no way around. It will be done by the two parties, meaning that whether you want it or not, you have to accept that those two parties have different views, and you have to understand those views in order to help them to have this kind of common position that at the end will be the cornerstone of a settlement. Meaning that, again, if you don't make the effort to understand what the Russians say, there is no way you will reach something. And but today, and that's very interesting, by the way, that even all everything I tried to maintain some kind of neutrality, objectivity in my assessments, it's still considered as propaganda. Think about it. That's that shows how strange has this word has become. Because even if you try to remain objective, it's still considered as propaganda. And France is officially, at least, not at war with Russia, nor is the European Union. At least that's what they claim. So we can ask ourselves, so what?
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much, Carl, for being with us today. It's always a pleasure to have you on and to talk with you. And we hope that, we know that the situation is getting worse, but we hope that you can find some sort of solution to get rid of these sanctions and the effects of sanctions. It's difficult. It's difficult.
Many thanks for that, and many thanks for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present my case and to explain my case. But I think it's even more important to be on shows like yours because, as I said, my sanctions is a political decision. And if people react to that, if people comment, if people, uh, how to say that, uh, share all these shows and share their comments and share their opinions about this can help the case, because at the end of the
Exactly.
day, again, it's not a matter of a legal, it's a political thing, meaning that the more people will say, well, stop with that, the more it will help my case. In fact, that's why I think it's very important to be present on social networks. And I mean, again, not also, I mean, social network I'm not, but on shows like yours, that's what I meant. And the all the work you do is in that sense extremely useful, because it helps to explain, I mean, to it gives also not just a platform to me, but it also gives a platform to all those who follow the show to tell that they are not happy with this kind of decision, that they're not happy with this kind of society, that they want something which is more just, more oriented toward peace and mutual understanding and all that. So this is, of course, at first glance, this show gives me a platform for me to express my opinion. But if you look at all the comments down the video on YouTube, that's where a lot of people can also express their opinion, their disgust, or um, their sympathy, or whatever. And that's extremely important, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what will put weight on the balance in my favor.